which is a very bad way to drive. So don't be blinded by the past. And this is also quite radical. Sometimes you should think about being exposed to the upside, so that when something happens dramatic, you can actually make a lot of money on it, or you can benefit from it. And create robust management. I mean, that's pretty obvious, isn't it, really? But robust management, you see, the thing about this is, I mean, I don't want to sound too cynical. The thing is that at least he got the concept across that if you think in straight lines and wiggly lines come at you, you're so busy. It's a secret line, you know. If you build your castles all in a row and then somebody goes around the edge of them, how good are the castles? They're no good at all. So you've got to be prepared to react rather than predict. And never forget, no risk. Okay. Now, we've got a couple of minutes left, so I thought we'd talk about decision making. And this is where I got carried away with the photographs. That's why I was sitting in the little cafe. I thought, can I actually do this presentation without any words? The point is, decision making in crisis. You know, anybody here been through a real crisis? I don't mean, oh my God, I don't know which hair should colour, dress colour. I mean a real, or whatever it is for men, what deodorant. I mean, have people been through real crises? Yes?
When we were children in 90s?
Yeah.
I remember.
Oh, of course, in the 90s. Yeah, of course. You all went through it, actually. Well, everybody was going through it. What, and I suppose now I'm going to be asking you, what do you think, how did your parents react? The first thing, I mean, I don't want this to be too personal, but so you don't have to answer the question. I mean, what happens, do you think, when the whole world changes? 1988 becomes 1991. The communist era is over. Your parents who've worked their way up through the apparatchiks, they're Communist Party members, they finally, after 15 years, got their zhiguli, they have a place in society, everybody respects them, and now there's guys who are the mafia, who deal in jeans, they've got the black BMWs and the goons, and they're the bosses. But what do you think is the first reaction to a massive crisis?
Fear.
What?
Fear.
Fear. Yeah. What's one of the things that, there's two things that happen in fear. One is, sorry?
Panic.
Panic.
And the other one is concentration.
Well, the trouble is, here's the of course, I'm talking to you as if I really know what I'm talking about. I mean, of course I don't know what I'm talking about. The fact is, I have been a crisis manager for 14 years around the world, but as a banker. And I wasn't in any real danger, and I wasn't facing real crises. So this is the middle class crisis thing. This is the easy crisis thing. The first thing that happens is that everybody turns out to be a rabbit in the headlights. Now, I say everybody. Some people, of course, are ready for this, they prepare for this, they take action, but most people simply can't believe it's happening. I mean, I often think about, you know, on my father's side I'm Jewish, I often think about how on earth did the Jews just let this thing happen to them? And as far as I can tell, they just couldn't believe it could be happening. It just was outside of their, you know, understanding. And when crises happen, the first person to move, the first person to understand what is going on, will have an advantage. Now the trick is obviously not just to take any action, whatever action, doesn't matter what action it is. Movement is better than no movement, absolutely. But if you run off in the wrong direction, you can fall off the cliff. So it's a question of how quickly can you gather information, analyze information, create an execution plan and execute it. And all of this is done in a state of triage. All of this is done in an environment where a problem comes in, you have three things you can do with it. You can ignore it, you can leave it till later, or you can deal with it right there and then. Those are the three things. It's just like with medicine. And if you've got a loan maturity in banking terms, and if you don't pay it, the bank calls the loan, and that causes a cross default, and that means that everybody else calls their loans, and that means you're bankrupt, and that means you're out of a job, and that means the factories are closed, and that means all the workers are gone, and that means you have to start from scratch, you better pay the loan. But you have to decide whether or not that's a bluff or real. And of course the trouble about this stuff is it doesn't come in nicely packaged with a little bow. This is what this decision is, this is what this decision is, these are the risks and these are the issues. And so one of the most important things you have to do in a crisis is grow, and I couldn't find it quick enough. I needed to find big ears. Actually, I've got big ears. You should find big ears. You need to listen and quickly understand what the new rules of the road are so that you can devise a plan. Past experience may not be relevant. If over your previous experience, by the way, I know this from my lending officers in 2008, if they did this, then this would happen. If they did that, then that would happen. And I had guys coming up to me and they said, or girls, and they said, but we've been doing this for 8 years, all our lives. We know what we're doing. Well, the answer to that is, yes, you did know what you were doing, but you're living in a very different world now. And so this business of cause and effect gets interrupted. And this interruption causes you to have to reconsider whether or not you should act in the same way. Now, the other thing that happens is you get guys like me. If they gave medals in banking, you'd be sitting there and you would be so impressed. I mean, I would have, like on Veterans Day, I'd have that many medals. Fortunately, they don't give medals for banking. But the fact is that I had all these medals, and people sort of knew it, but they just thought I was old and wasn't really relevant. But those medals came from facing all these crises before. So when the crisis starts to happen, I know what to do, because I've done it all my life. And then you get the next mistake, which is that cause no longer equals effect. So Mr. Know-it-all, who's done it all before, thinks that the previous cause and effect that he saw in all the other crises is going to be the same. But every crisis is different. It has a different duration, it has a different depth, it has a different, people are asking me, is it a V-shaped recovery, is it a W-shaped recovery? Eventually I said, no, it's a Q. It's like, oh, really? What is a Q? It means, I haven't got a clue. But each of these recoveries or economic systems have a different shape. It took me a long time to find that photograph. I hope you appreciate it. Efficient cycling of information. What does that mean? It means what you're doing is that with these big ears of yours, you see, the thing is that it's easy for us in this room to have a little chat. Because right at the back, I assume you can still hear me even if you don't want to. But if I'm running a bank with 3,000 people in it, you may have information. You, out there, in front of the customer, may have information that I, sitting in my big office, need. And if I'm waiting for it to ripple through all these multiple layers of bureaucracy, by the time it gets to me, it's all too late. So you have to, like with a Meccano, well, in England we have Meccano or electric sets, you have to connect different electric bits around the organisation so that they trip, so that they react to different stimuli. Which ones is up to you to decide, but the fact is that you're looking for a different way and you need to cycle that information as quickly as possible. Now, one absolute thing applies. When the river looks like this, I mean, the way I really wanted, there's sort of 3 stages. I didn't have time to find it. The river looks great. The sun is out. You're with your boyfriend or girlfriend and you're drinking wine. And the sun is out and the birds are singing. And the canoe is drifting slowly. And then it starts to drift a little faster. And the birds are singing and the sun's out and everything's lovely. And then the canoe starts to pick up speed. And all I'm talking about is the GDP figures begin to get a little lower. Exports begin to slow. Bank credit begins to run into problems. You know, I mean, you can see these things bit by bit. They're just a little bit at a time. Meanwhile, we're driving our SUVs and we're having a great time. But if you're not careful, this becomes that. The moment that you reach a point in a crisis where it has locked itself in, you know, you're in the crisis. You're not going to fight that crisis. There's no way. The best thing you can do is swim for your life. And swimming for your life in a crisis is a very different set of things. You see, the thing about being in that canoe in the middle of the river is if you had bothered to pick up the paddle and stop drinking the Chardonnay and you started moving towards the side, those people that see these issues early are able to take action that's so much easier than being in the middle of this. Being in the middle of this is survival. And that's a very different set of skills. I was okay, I was running out of time. Don't let, this is what I told you before, don't let the urgent crowd out the important. It is so easy to let the urgent things crowd out the important. And so, in summary, take action but be informed. Now, I've just given you basically an economic analysis of what happens in a crisis that may happen or may not happen next year by about June. But it's not that attitude to change, that attitude to how you deal with change, being aware of new information, opening yourself up to new sources of information, recycling it, cycling it, constantly thinking, how does this apply to me? What can I do to benefit from this? How can I minimize it? And by the way, how can I help others? Because I'm sure, I mean, if you haven't come across it by now, I'm sure you've come across it by now. The main bank in the world is not Citibank, is not HSBC or Sparebank. It's the Favour Bank. That's the only real bank in the world. That's the bank that you can have something to do with. And it's the bank that causes you to do things unexpectedly and in a positive way for other people, so that at a point in time in the future, people do unexpected and positive things for you. And you can believe in that stuff or not. It's all about fairy stories. It isn't about fairy stories. People react positively to positive people. 27 minutes and 34 seconds. Well, it's 8 o'clock. That was another little lecture. But you're all very quiet. Come on.
What do you expected?
Well, I was expecting somebody to get up and say, this is rubbish. You don't know what you're talking about. Or somebody to say, well, how about this? Or how about that? How about, is there any real crossover between what people do in the financial world and what people do in the rest of the world?
Sure.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
just a part of the life.
What?
It's just a part of the life.
Finance is a part of life.
Yeah. It's all relevant.
And do you think to be good at life you have to be good at finances?
In a way.
Why? Does that mean if you're bad at finances, everything else follows will be bad?
No. But if you are not that good at finances, you probably should have somebody who is.
So, money can't buy you happiness, but without it, you get a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's the
I
question?
think your question better works the opposite way, because if you are good at life, you will be good at finances, one or the other way. It doesn't imply you being good at life while being good at finances. However, if you have enough life experience, well, most likely it will help you in any question whatsoever, whether financial or any other crisis. So,
Mhm.
I'm actually answering the question I wasn't asked.
That's okay. If,
He was.
Because he predicted that.
how much risk do you think you have to take to be successful?
Much. Too
Really?
much in Russia.
It depends.
Oh, yeah, it depends for you, but too much for you. No, but I mean, I'm just, okay, but when you say too much, doesn't too much mean you shouldn't do it then? Look, there's a risk-reward criteria, right? And it depends on your appetite. Remember, risk-reward depends on your appetite. So first of all, you say, I want to be successful. And that means I will take this amount of risk. But how about this amount of risk? You see, the point is, at some point, you have to say, no, I'm not going to take this amount of risk. Now, I guess that, what have you got? You know what you've got going for you? That you've got going in just huge amounts. You've got youth, energy, ambition, expectation, positivity. You have the fact that you can fail and fail and fail and fail and fail, fail and fail and fail and fail, and then be incredibly successful. And I think that opportunity, that fact that you have that energy and the fact that you can keep going at it until you get it right, what a wonderful gift that is, even if it may not seem it at the time. So I think I actually agree with you. You can take a whole bunch of risk, because what are you going to lose? As long as you learn from the failure, remember last week, then actually the worst thing that can happen is you fail and then you pick yourself up and you do it again, but better. I think the mistake is when you internalize the failure. To me. This is great. There's one guy and a bunch of you. Has he finished yet? Can we go? I mean, do you have any points or issues or questions? Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, that you need to control a part of risk in your life. So I think it's very dangerous to start a deal with 50% of success. Maybe you can lose anything, and if you make some deals with 50% like coin, you can lose any time. Yes, and
you want to weight the coin.
And if you control your risk, so you understand that you have 70-80% of success of success. You maybe only in this time you can make your decision.
Okay, but now I've got the next question. How do you know you've got 80% chance of success? You see, the thing about the thing, well, I mean, that certainly helps. The one thing that's absolutely true about life is you don't know what happens next. But I completely agree with you. Sorry, let me just get something off my chest. In banking, right? In banking, I come across people, and do you know what they do? They're good at two things. They're good at moving jobs and interviews. Right? They don't have time to learn any skills or build any experience. But by God, they've got great suits, and they talk a good story, and they get a big job. And by the time they get themselves into a big enough job, they come crashing down and they pull a whole bunch of people with them. And I, because I'm an old, grumbly guy, hate people that don't spend time on their craft. Because if you don't spend the time on your craft, how can you then use it? And I'm sure that that's what I don't know if that's what you get taught here. But if you don't learn from the ground up how it works, only when it becomes a fluid movement can you actually make, you can make that decision as an 80% chance. Yeah.
Can I ask, how can you deal with the problem of relevance and reliability? Because there's this fact that when time passes, information gets more reliable, but you lose relevance. So this will...
Information is power. You know, actually, it's a very interesting thing. It's a very interesting thing that in the old days, having a library put you ahead. Well, actually, in the really old days, having the ability to know what happened to the tides made you a priest, gave you the right to decide what happened on the Nile. And you got to be on the inside circle because you knew when the wind was coming, when the tides was raising. And information was limited to a very small number of people. Now, I don't know how you people cope, because it's all in here. And now, what happens is that I mean, you know, for these images, and I didn't work very hard at it, I just put in some phrase that I wanted, I went to the image, and there was the image. You know, how do you, when everybody is available, everybody has the same level of information, do you differentiate yourself? My guess is by the way you manipulate that information. Because it's an equal playing field in terms of the information itself. Of course, there's this other issue, which I don't know about because I don't know enough about education, which is how much in education now people are expected to remember, and how much people simply refer to a machine. And how much value is there in the remembering, and how much value is there in the manipulation of the information. And that's, I think, far more complicated than we're going to sort out tonight. But I think that it's a good essay question, you know, which I can't answer. I do know that you know, for instance, when I teach and people have their computers open, well, two things happen. People have their computers open, they start going on Facebook because they get bored. Well, you know, that's just impolite, but that's okay. But the other thing that they do is they fact check. You know, if I make a statement about something, you know, they go online and check that it's true. You know, my son was ranked number 3 in America in rock climbing when he was 13. Oh, really? But, you know, in a rather more serious way. So it makes the job of being a teacher much more difficult as well. I know it's getting late, so I don't want to keep you.
There's one more question. If you,
No. I'm free as a bird, but I'm just worried about you.
I think we're okay. There's one question that I think like a lot of us would like to ask. It seems like I'm the only one who's actually asking. It has something to do with risks, but as a CEO of a bank, your company probably supports like other companies and gives sponsorships and all that, and gives money to other projects. And like, as far as it's the risk, what do you like? What's the most important fact? Like, what's the most important issue to look for when you're looking forward to giving somebody a like certain amount of money? Okay,
just for the sake of clarity, I no longer run a bank, I have no money, so we'll get that out. It's okay. Just in case you want to get me before I hit the door. But let me, I can tell you a few things. I mean, well, first of all, I think you have to package what you've got, right? You know, I was the main sponsor for tango in Russia for about 7 years, and I sponsored the festivals, and because for me, why did I do this? Well, first of all, I tried to learn tango. I can't tango. I can tango in a straight line for about 5 seconds, but it would, to me, you see, as a CEO, I instantly understood visually that in a cold climate, a hot dance with people working together in a beautiful motion summarizes a lot of what you want your customers to think about. I don't mean the sex stuff, I don't mean any of that stuff. I mean the fact that this is it's, you know, did I tell you the story about the tango? I can't remember last week. Did I tell you? No?
No.
Okay, I'll tell you a quick story about tango. By the way, this may help you with the project, and it may not, but it's a story about tango. So I tried to learn the tango, I failed, but I did learn that tango is a wonderful dance, and I thought that as an image, it was a wonderful image. And when I went to run HSBC, they have the 3 images. You may see them at the airports. They have like 3 pictures of a baby, and one will say security, one will say love, one will say money. And the idea is that people see the same thing but with different perspectives. And the idea of the advertising campaign was, we care about the way you look at the world. I mean, I won't go into whether I think that's true or not, but that's the concept of the... So I thought, look, tango, let's get this... But I was financing the festivals anyway. We're a huge multinational bank. I will run a competition where I will get people to come up with the 3 words that represent tango for them. And if they win, I will fly them to Buenos Aires and teach them the tango in Buenos Aires. And you might think, wow, well, that's ridiculous. Well, guess where HSBC has its offices? In Buenos Aires. So I then paid Hello Magazine to follow these people around. And now all that was left was the 3 words that represent tango. So we ran a competition. We got 6,000 responses. What was the most common word that people use for tango?
Passion.
Yeah, everybody gets it. Passion, movement, lightness. Do you know what was the most interesting thing that I found out? Was if you talk to the tango dancers, the real tango dancers, and you say, what's one of the things that you associate with tango? They say separation. And I said, what are you talking about, separation? And they said, because there's a moment when the dance is over and you have to separate. And for them, a lot of the emotion was a separation. But the guy who won, and I was the judge and the jury, won because he came up with physics, chemistry, geometry. Think about it. Physics, chemistry, it's so clever. It's physical, it's chemistry, it's geometry. And then, just so you understand, as a CEO, I had another big problem. What was my problem, do you think? Now, don't forget that these were letters that were sent in. What was the problem? There was the photographer from OK Magazine. There was my brand new bank. The thing was to have this guy with his girlfriend fly to Buenos Aires. What could possibly go wrong?
He didn't write his name?
No, he wrote his name. He did not attach a photograph, because we couldn't do that. What happens if this guy was a beer-swilling, lumberjack from Irkutsk, and his wife was also a beer-swilling lumberjack from Irkutsk? And when they did the tango, they had to reach out like this, and it was all just didn't look right. And so I had to interview them in my office. I mean, of course, I had a plan. I was a CEO. I was going to pay them off, and we had models available that were going to pretend to be them. But the guy walked through the door. He looked exactly like a tango dancer. And then his girlfriend walked through the door. She looked exactly like a tango. Done. It's perfect. He's still a friend of mine. So why did that work? It worked because the image, that project hit the image. I mean, I created something called Soyuznik with Bank Soyuz, which was a student program. And a friend of mine, Ilya Lagutenko, was, my kind of, he's the guy that sold it. And it was a hit student program. What was in it for me? Well, it was simple. I wanted you all to have free debit cards. And then I wanted your parents to put money on them, so that you had money to spend with my bank. But to make it hip, we designed ATMs, a scientific, a rude, a glamorous, and one other. So the glamorous, when you put your card in, and we put them in the university